Most motorcycles evolve or disappear within a decade, but not the Suzuki DR650. In 1996, Suzuki redesigned this dual-sport adventure bike with an air and oil-cooled single-cylinder, basic carburetor and no electronics. Then they walked away and never updated it. While competitors added fuel injection, traction control and complex electronics, the DR650 has barely changed in 29 years. Some have crossed 200,000 kilometers, others have circled the globe twice. They just keep running. How did Suzuki's forgotten thumper outlast every modern adventure bike? In 1990, Suzuki introduced the DR650 as a replacement for the DR600. The original version came in multiple models with different names: the Jebel, the Dakar, the RS. Some had Kickstarters, others got electric start by 1991. For the first 6 years, Suzuki kept tweaking the design. They changed the exhaust system, they made the fuel tank smaller, they reduced weight by 8 kilograms in 1992. Then in 1996, everything changed by stopping. That year, Suzuki introduced the DR650 SE. They redesigned the engine to make power delivery smoother instead of more powerful. They simplified the bike even further. No tachometer, no fuel gauge, just a speedometer and some warning lights. And then Suzuki basically walked away from it. For the next 29 years, the DR650 remained almost completely unchanged. The same 644cc single-cylinder engine, the same frame design, the same basic suspension setup. While every other motorcycle manufacturer released new models every few years with updated electronics, fuel injection, and modern features, Suzuki kept building the same bike year after year. The only real changes? Paint colors, small cost-saving measures in manufacturing. That's it. This wasn't a marketing strategy, it was unplanned obsolescence. Suzuki simply stopped caring about the DR650, and that turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to it. Here's what Suzuki's neglect created: a motorcycle frozen in 1996 technology that became more valuable because time stopped. Think about what that means. While Honda and Yamaha and BMW were adding fuel injection, traction control, ABS brakes, and complicated electronics to their adventure bikes, the DR650 kept its simple carburetor and basic ignition system. While other manufacturers designed bikes that required dealer-specific diagnostic computers and specialized tools, the DR650 could be fixed with basic hand tools and duct tape. While modern bikes became too complex for roadside repairs, the DR650 stayed simple enough that a rider could diagnose and fix most problems in a parking lot. The bike that Suzuki forgot became the bike that riders could trust in places where modern technology was a liability. The engine is air and oil cooled, which means no water pumps to fail, no coolant to leak, no radiators to crack, just metal fins cooling the engine and a small oil cooler doing the rest. The carburetor is old technology that riders complain about. You have to wait for it to warm up on cold mornings. It loses power at high altitude. It's not as smooth as fuel injection. But here's what a carburetor is: mechanical. No computers, no sensors, no electronic fuel pumps. If it breaks, you can see what's wrong and fix it with basic tools. Try doing that with a modern fuel injection system in the middle of the Sahara Desert. The frame is basic steel tube construction, not exotic aluminum or carbon fiber. Just steel that can be welded by any welder in any small town anywhere in the world. The bike weighs 162 kilograms wet. That's light enough to pick up when you drop it, heavy enough to be stable on highways, and simple enough that everything on it serves a purpose. This wasn't revolutionary engineering. It was practical engineering that Suzuki then had the wisdom or laziness to leave alone. Here's where the DR650's reputation stops being talk and starts being math. Round the world traveler Magnus Olivier wrote about his DR650 reaching over 100,000 kilometers. Multiple riders reported their DR650s passing 140,000 kilometers without major engine work. But here's the problem: most motorcycle riders don't believe those numbers are possible. Olivier posted about his high mileage experience in a Facebook group. Other riders responded by telling him he was lying or that he'd gotten impossibly lucky. The collective response was that motorcycles just don't last that long, except they do. Grant Johnson, founder of the Horizons Unlimited travel community, confirmed a friend's DR650 had exceeded 140,000 kilometers with almost everything still original except chains and sprockets. The engine had never been opened. It ran perfectly. Another round-the-world traveler named Egla Garulatite had ridden her DR650 for more than 100,000 kilometers through conditions that would destroy most bikes. She cracked the frame at one point and had it welded and kept riding. Adventure riders Jan Giovannoni and Aga Makura bought 2 used DR650s in Australia and rode them over 33,000 kilometers around the continent. Their only significant mechanical problem? Old O-rings in the carburetor float that broke and flooded the engine. They rebuilt the carburetor and kept going. The pattern holds across hundreds of documented cases. DR650s regularly exceed 100,000 kilometers. Many reach 160,000, some pass 200,000 kilometers. These aren't garage queens. They're bikes ridden through Australian deserts, South American mountains, African dust, and Asian monsoons. They fall over, they get covered in mud, they run on questionable fuel, yet they keep working. The maintenance requirements help explain why. Oil changes every 6,000 kilometers, air filter cleaning every 3,000 kilometers. These are shorter intervals than modern bikes, but the work is simple enough that riders do it themselves in less than an hour. Everything on the DR650 is accessible. The oil drain plug sits at the bottom of the bash plate. Remove one bolt and drain the oil. The oil filter requires removing 3 bolts. The air filter needs 4 bolts to access. No special tools required, no dealer computers needed, just basic hand tools and clean oil. This is the genius that Suzuki accidentally created, a motorcycle that survives because it's simple enough to maintain anywhere. By 2001, the DR650 had disappeared from Europe. New emissions regulations required catalytic converters and fuel injection. The carbureted DR650 couldn't pass the standards, so Suzuki stopped selling it there. In 2021, Australia banned the DR650. New safety regulations went into effect on November 1st. The DR650 didn't meet those requirements. After decades of being one of the best-selling adventure bikes in Australia, it vanished from showrooms. But here's the thing about a bike with a reputation for lasting forever. The used market doesn't care about new bike regulations. In New Zealand, where the bike remained legal, the DR650 became the best-selling over 500cc motorcycle. Not just in its category, the best-selling. It regularly appeared in the top 5 sellers of any capacity in the entire country. In Canada, the DR650 continued as one of Suzuki's strongest sellers. In the United States, it remained in the lineup year after year while more sophisticated bikes came and went. Suzuki kept building the same 1996 design because dealers kept ordering it and customers kept buying it. The bike's survival became proof of its value. If a 29-year-old design could still compete against modern adventure bikes loaded with electronics and features, maybe those features weren't as essential as manufacturers claimed. The DR650's simplicity creates advantages that sophisticated bikes can't match. Weight is the first advantage. At 162 kilograms, the DR650 weighs significantly less than adventure bikes with similar engine sizes. A BMW F850 GS weighs 229 kilograms. A Triumph Tiger 900 weighs 201. That 40 to 70 kilogram difference matters every time you pick the bike up after dropping it. It matters when you're pushing through sand or mud. It matters when you're navigating tight trails. Parts availability is the second advantage. Because the DR650 hasn't changed since 1961, parts from different model years are interchangeable. A clutch lever from a 1997 model fits a 2024 model. This created a huge used parts market where finding replacements is simple and cheap. Suzuki dealers exist in most countries. The parts are inexpensive compared to European adventure bikes. And because the design is so common, local machine shops can fabricate replacement parts if official Suzuki parts aren't available. Aftermarket support is the third advantage. When a bike stays untouched for 3 decades, specialty companies can develop products specifically for it. Companies like B&B Off-Road, ProCycle, Warp 9, and dozens of others built entire businesses around DR650 accessories. You can buy upgraded suspension, larger fuel tanks, better seats, engine guards, skid plates, luggage racks, and hundreds of other parts designed specifically for this bike. The aftermarket for the DR650 is larger than the aftermarket for bikes that sold in higher numbers but kept changing every few years. The fourth advantage is knowledge. 30 years of riding working on the same basic design created a massive database of solutions to every problem the bike has. Every weak point is documented, every failure mode is known, every fix has been tested by thousands of riders and shared online. Online communities like drriders.com, ADV Riders 650 Forum, and dozens of Facebook groups contain decades of collective wisdom. Ask a question about any DR650 problem and you'll get multiple answers from people who've solved that exact issue. This institutional knowledge means you're never alone with a broken DR650. Someone somewhere has already fixed what just broke on your bike, and they've written about how they did it. The DR650's unchanged design also means Suzuki never fixed its known problems. The neutral sending unit issue affected bikes built before 2017. 2 screws holding the neutral indicator sensor could loosen, fall into the engine, and cause catastrophic damage. The fix is simple. Remove the screws, apply thread locker, and reinstall them. But Suzuki didn't add thread locker from the factory for 21 years. The countershaft seal problem hit bikes made before 2012. The countershaft could move out of position, causing the bike to dump all of its oil while riding. Suzuki eventually redesigned the part, but didn't recall earlier bikes or offer free replacement parts. Riders had to discover the issue on their own and install the updated part themselves. The upper drive chain roller is a part that can break, fall off, and punch a hole through the frame. The solution recommended by experienced riders is to remove the roller entirely and replace it with a bolt and thread locker. Suzuki never changed this design. Wire harness chafing causes electrical problems as wires rub against the frame. The fix is simple: add protective covering to the harness. Suzuki never added this protection from the factory. These aren't theoretical problems, they're documented failures that happen to real bikes. The difference is that the DR650 community has identified all of them and created preventative fixes that riders can do before problems occur. This is the trade-off of buying a bike Suzuki forgot about. The company never improved it, never fixed its weak points, never updated it, but the riders did all of that themselves. The DR650 isn't the best at anything specific. It's good enough for everything that matters. On highways, it cruises comfortably at 100 km/h all day. Push it to 120 and the vibration from the big single-cylinder engine becomes tiring. The lack of wind protection doesn't help. The off-road tires create road noise. It's not a highway bike, but it can do highway riding well enough to get you between destinations. Off-road, the DR650 handles fire roads, gravel, sand, and moderate trails easily. The 21-inch front wheels give good directional control. The torque from the 644cc engine pulls you through sand and mud. The lightweight makes it manageable when you need to wrestle it around obstacles. It's not a technical enduro bike, but it handles rough terrain well enough that experienced riders can take it places that would stop bigger adventure bikes. For long-distance touring, the DR650 lacks comfort features that dedicated touring bikes have. The stock seat is terrible. Hard as wood and flat as a board, the stock fuel tank holds 13 litres, giving a range of about 250 kilometers before you're walking. But the aftermarket provides solutions. Companies like Safari and IMS make larger fuel tanks holding 23 to 30 litres. Companies like Seat Concepts and Sargent make comfortable seats. Add a windscreen, heated grips, and luggage racks, and the DR650 becomes a capable long-distance machine. This is the DR650's secret. It's a platform that riders modify to fit their specific needs rather than a finished product Suzuki designed for one purpose. Round-the-world travelers buy used DR650s and spend between $2,000 and $3,000 on upgrades, creating personalized adventure bikes for a total investment of $6,000 to $8,000. That's less than half the cost of a new BMW or Triumph adventure bike, and it's simple enough to maintain anywhere in the world. The motorcycle industry spends billions developing new models every few years. Manufacturers add electronics, improve ergonomics, increase power, and redesign styling to keep customers buying new bikes. The DR650 proves that strategy might be wrong. Riders don't buy DR650s because they're exciting. They buy them because they work. They buy them because they're cheap to purchase and cheaper to maintain. Because they're simple enough to fix without a dealer. Because they're light enough to handle off-road. Because they're proven by 3 decades of riders who put hundreds of thousands of kilometers on them. The DR650 survived by being boring in all the right ways. It's boring because nothing breaks, boring because the maintenance is predictable, boring because every problem has a known solution, boring because it just keeps running year after year. In an industry that sells excitement and innovation, the DR650 sells reliability and simplicity. That's not as sexy in advertisements, but it is more valuable when you're 500 kilometers from the nearest town and your bike won't start. The fact that Suzuki basically abandoned this bike after 1996 meant they never had the chance to ruin it. They never added complexity that could fail. They never redesigned parts that already worked. They never tried to make it appeal to buyers who wanted the latest technology. They built a simple, tough motorcycle and then left it alone. That neglect created something more valuable than innovation: trust. The DR650's biggest competition never came from other manufacturers. It came from the bike that shared its own market, the Kawasaki KLR 650. Both bikes targeted the same buyers. Both were budget-friendly 650cc dual sports. Both had reputations for reliability. Both had loyal followings who swore their choice was superior. But the differences reveal why the DR650's simplicity became its advantage. The KLR 650 weighs 207 kilograms, 45 kilos heavier than the DR650. That's the weight of another passenger. On pavement, that extra mass doesn't matter much, but pick up a dropped bike in sand or mud and those 45 kilograms feel like 100. The KLR uses liquid cooling, which means radiators, hoses, water pumps, and coolant. More systems that can fail. The DR650's air and oil cooling has no coolant to leak, no water pump to break, no radiators to crack from impacts. The KLR's engine has a documented weakness, the balancer chain tensioner. The stock tensioner uses a spring that can fail, causing the balancer chain to come loose and destroy the engine from the inside. KLR owners call this part the doohickey, and replacing it before it fails is considered essential maintenance. Online forums are filled with stories of riders whose engines self-destructed because the doohickey failed. The DR650 has its own documented problems too: the neutral sending unit screw, the countershaft seal, the chain roller. But none of them destroy the engine if they fail, and all of them have simple fixes that experienced DR riders do preventatively. Riders who've owned both bikes consistently report the same pattern. The KLR is fine until something breaks, then repairs are more complicated. The DR650 rarely breaks, and when it does, fixes are simpler. This comparison matters because it shows what Suzuki's neglect created. By not updating the DR650, Suzuki left it simpler than its competition. That simplicity became a competitive advantage that Kawasaki's more sophisticated KLR couldn't match. The DR650's reputation moved beyond recreational riders when organizations that needed reliable motorcycles started choosing it. Campus Security at North Carolina State University runs a fleet of DR650s for daily patrol work. These bikes aren't babied, they're ridden year-round in all weather, often by multiple riders per day, and maintained by mechanics who work on the entire campus vehicle fleet. The choice of DR650s over sophisticated police motorcycles or dual sports reveals the same pattern: simple, proven, easy to maintain, cheap to repair. Organizations making decisions with taxpayer money or institutional budgets don't choose bikes based on excitement or brand loyalty. They choose based on total cost of ownership and reliability. The fact that security departments and organizations keep choosing 29-year-old technology says everything about whether that technology still works. But the most telling endorsement comes from the rental market in remote locations. Adventure touring companies in places like Australia, New Zealand, and parts of South America rent DR650s to tourists who want to ride unpaved roads in harsh conditions. These are bikes that will be ridden hard by inexperienced riders who don't know how to maintain them properly. Rental companies can't afford bikes that break constantly. They can't use bikes that need specialized repairs. They need motorcycles that tolerate abuse and keep running with minimal maintenance. The DR650 fits that requirement better than newer, more sophisticated adventure bikes that cost 3 times as much. When Suzuki stopped developing the DR650 after 1996, they created a vacuum. Riders wanted improvements that Suzuki wasn't going to provide, so the riders built those improvements themselves. Companies like B&B Off-Road Engineering exist almost entirely to make DR650 parts. They manufacture engine guards, skid plates, oil cooler guards, frame guards, and dozens of other protective parts designed specifically for this bike. Warp 9 makes heavy-duty wheels and wheel components that survive harsh off-road riding better than the stock wheels. ProCycle makes performance suspension components that transform the DR650's basic suspension into something capable of serious off-road work. Safari Tanks, IMS, and Akabis all make larger fuel tanks because the stock 13-litre tank is inadequate for long-distance riding. Seat Concepts and Sargent make comfortable seats because the stock seat is universally hated. These companies built entire businesses around a single motorcycle model that hadn't changed in decades. They wouldn't invest in developing specialized parts if the DR650 design kept changing every few years. The aftermarket support for the DR650 exceeds the factory support Suzuki provides. Walk into a Suzuki dealer and ask about performance upgrades for a DR650, and they'll have nothing to offer. Search online for DR650 upgrades and you'll find hundreds of options from dozens of specialized manufacturers. This created a strange situation. The DR650 you buy from a Suzuki dealer is the starting point, not the finished product. Experienced DR650 owners consider the stock bike inadequate and immediately begin planning modifications, but those modifications are predictable. After 3 decades, the DR650 community has identified exactly what needs upgrading and in what order. New DR650 owners also don't need to guess. They follow a proven path of upgrades that thousands of riders have already tested. This is the opposite of how the motorcycle industry normally works. Usually manufacturers design complete motorcycles and discourage modifications. With the DR650, Suzuki abandoned development and the community took over, creating a better bike than Suzuki ever intended to build. As of 2025, the DR650 is still in production. It's still essentially the same bike Suzuki designed in 1996. It has a carburetor, no tachometer, no fuel gauge, and no electronic rider aids. It's a 29-year-old design competing against motorcycles with cornering ABS, traction control, ride-by-wire throttles, and TFT color displays. And riders keep buying it, not because it's the fastest, not because it's the most comfortable, not because it's the most advanced. They buy it because it's most likely to still be running 100,000 kilometers from now. In an industry obsessed with the newest and most advanced, the DR650 became legendary by being the oldest and the simplest. That's not the story Suzuki intended to tell when they introduced it in 1990. But it's the story that riders around the world have proven true through hundreds of thousands of kilometers of actual riding. The bike Suzuki forgot became the bike riders refused to let die. The Suzuki DR650 wasn't built to be legendary, it survived by being simple enough that nothing could kill it. While other manufacturers chased innovation, Suzuki walked away and let this bike prove that sometimes the best engineering decision is making no decision at all. Would you trust a 29-year-old design to carry you across a continent? More importantly, would you bet your life on technology that refuses to change? Let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about motorcycles that succeeded by breaking all the rules, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell.